everyone, and welcome back to day one of the 6.5 Summit. In this next session, I'm going to be talking to Eli Greenfield, Chief Technology Officer of Digital Media at Adobe. In this spotlight session, we're going to be discussing a very hot topic, generative AI. Welcome to the 6.5 Summit, Eli.
Thanks, Mel. I'm excited to be here. It's obviously a hot topic and an interesting topic, so I can talk about it all day.
Great. Well, we're excited to hear what you have to say. Let's get started. What are your views just on the promise of generative AI?
Yeah. So, in short, generative AI, I think, is revolutionary and transformative. I mean, obviously, it is the topic of the moment, and it's probably going through a bit of a hype cycle. But this is one of those rare technologies, I think, that comes along that is going to deliver on probably a lot of the hype. Not everything we're seeing today, but it is going to be pretty transformative to the way we work. Our job at Adobe for the past 40 years in the digital media side has been about sort of helping people create content and create media using computers, using technology, and really working on elevating that conversation between the human and the computer so that it's less and less about making the humans learn how to speak the way a computer understands and really turning that around so that the computer can understand the human's intent and understand the human's language and help them be more productive at creating the content that they're imagining in their head. And I think what generative AI does is radically transform where that conversation is happening. So with whether we're talking about large language models or creative models like Adobe Firefly, the one we released a few weeks ago, these technologies allow you to literally just describe what it is you're looking for, what you want to see or what you want to create, and have the computer really kind of pull those concepts and thoughts out of your head and create them for you. So whether you're a creative professional for whom this is going to be a massive productivity boost, or like me, more of a creative beginner where I never really know exactly where to get started, I think this is going to be pretty transformative in how content gets created.
Yeah, I had a chance to play around with it. It was very, very cool. I think there's some interesting things that it comes up with, and then the more you kind of learn to fine tune it, the more it sort of gives you the outputs. I actually found some on the Discord channel, some really great tips on how to properly kind of describe what it is you're looking for, and kind of what you were saying, like meld those, the human language into the computer outputs was super interesting.
It's definitely still a technology that, the more you learn it, the more you use it, the more effective you can be with it. But if you compare the learning curve of using something like Firefly to using traditional professional tools, whether it's Adobe's tools or other SaaS products or tools coming from other companies, the learning curve of figuring out how to speak to the computer in human language is way easier than the amount of time that people have invested in learning the production of tools, which isn't really about being creative or about trying to accomplish your goal. It's really more about the production aspect of it. Of great, I know what I want to create, or I have an idea of it. How do I get from the idea in my head to an idea on the screen? That's, I think, where once you've learned the tool a little bit, generative AI makes this a dramatically easier proposition to figure out how to get that down on not on paper but in pixels, I guess.
Yeah, I think what might be interesting, maybe to answer, is just how in terms of productivity, in one of the demos I saw, there was the ability to basically iterate on a number of different ideas, and it's just producing so much more content, so much faster than
Mhm.
how somebody would typically produce creative content. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So for people who haven't played with Firefly or any of the other technologies out there, it really is as simple as I describe an image or a part of an image that I'm looking for, and Firefly, in a matter of seconds, generates that section of an image or generates an image that best matches what you asked for. You can iterate with Firefly on modifying the style. So you can ask for a photorealistic style or an artistic style or an iconic style. You can ask for lighting. You can ask for camera angles. You can ask for underlying artistic style if you want to create a work of art. So it is very much an iterative experience, and it shows up in multiple ways. So the simplest one is what we call the text to image feature, which is literally just start with a blank screen, describe an image you want, and you get an image back, and then you can iterate on that. We have text effects, where you can start with some text that you wrote in a particular. You choose a font, you type out the text like you would in any tool, but then you use a prompt to describe how you want that text styled. So my favorite one is you can write some text and ask for it to be styled as crashing waves, and it literally looks like the text was written with crashing waves. And then what we just released, which is really exciting, is generative fill, and this is something that's available on the website, but also integrated into Photoshop, which is pretty fantastic. That allows you to take an image that you have and select an area using Photoshop selection tools, and then ask for it to modify the image or add something to the image or remove something from the image, or extend the image or change the background, again, using a simple prompt to describe it. And it takes that core generative technology and integrates it with all the power of Photoshop. So it creates new layers, so it's non-destructive. You can use all of Photoshop's selection tools to define the area you want to change. And once you have a layer, you can iterate on it, move it around, ask for new generations, and then use all of the power of, that's been built in Photoshop over the past 40 years to do further modification of those if you want to get down to pixel level editing.
Let's talk about the responsible use of the technology. What steps can be used to encourage the responsible use of generative AI?
So yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, there's a lot of excitement about the technology right now, and concerns and questions as well. And so when it comes to responsibility, we actually break it into two pieces. One is, how do we encourage responsible use of generative AI, and also how do we encourage responsible development of generative AI? So you asked about use, so I'll start with that one first. First and foremost, I think the best thing we can do, both as Adobe, as customers using our technology, or as people using generative AI, out in the world, whether it's ours or someone else's, is number one, focus on what we call human in the loop use cases. So these technologies are amazing, but they are still developing and growing, and so sometimes you can be surprised by the kinds of things they can generate. So we always encourage people to use the technology in situations where you generate something, and then a human has a chance to evaluate it and to look at it and decide, is this something I want, or do I want to go back to the drawing board and try again, in case something surprising comes up. And so, certainly when you're integrating this technology and using it in Photoshop or using it in Express or any of other tools, the creator is there to look at the content and decide whether they want to accept it or reject it, just as with any other tool they're using from Adobe. So having a human's judgment involved is the best way, first of all, to make sure that that it's being used responsibly. The second piece is things we can do to enable responsible use or evaluation on behalf of the consumer, the person who's going to end up consuming the content. And that's where we've invested in, for the past few years, in something called the Content Authenticity Initiative. That's an effort that we've put together. It's an open source, open standards-based effort that we're working with partners. There's about 1,000 different partners involved in the process right now. And the goal there is to make sure that all of the information about how content was created that would be interesting or useful to a consumer, so that they can come to their own conclusions in an informed way about the content, is available for them. So you can think of this almost as like the nutrition label, like a digital nutrition label for content rather than for food. So if you're going to go, eat some food, that nutrition label is always there. You can look at it and you can read as much or as little as you want. And then we don't try and tell you, or the nutrition label doesn't tell you whether this is something you should eat or shouldn't eat, or whether it's healthy or not. It just gives the facts to you so that you as a consumer can make an informed decision. That's exactly how content credentials work. So with this technology, when you go and consume a piece of content, you can look and see what tools were used in creating it. Was generative AI used in creating it? Sometimes you can actually see what the source content was used. So if somebody started with a photo and then modified it in some way, you can look at the original photo and say, did they modify this in a way that substantially alters the meaning and the conclusions of the photo? Or did they just do something like lighten up the tone because unfortunately it was too dark when they shot the original photo? And again, whether or not that's important, whether or not that changes the way you interact with the content, is very situation dependent. So the goal is to put the capability and the choice in the hands of the consumer by getting the information to them at the right time.
That's great. You talked about just the ethical use of it. What ethical considerations should be taken into account when developing generative AI systems?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's the other side of the coin here. As a company developing AI systems, and as a company that's been doing it for probably about a decade now, we've put a lot of thought into how do we develop and release these technologies and assess them so that we make sure that we are minimizing or eliminating any sort of unintentional harm or bias that can be introduced into the world using these technologies. So we think it's important for every company doing this to make these same kinds of assessments and investments. We've developed a whole framework at Adobe. So every feature that we develop that touches AI goes through an AI impact assessment where we look at it and say, what is the potential for harm and bias here? What is the intentional and unintentional harm? So if somebody's trying to do harm, what can they do? If somebody's not trying to do harm, is there possibility for us to accidentally introduce bias into their output or somehow create unintentional results? So our lens is responsibility, transparency, and accountability. So in each of one of those pillars, we look and say, are we being transparent in how the content is being developed and what technology is being used? Are we being responsible in the efforts we're making to make sure we understand and mitigate impact? And then do we hold ourselves accountable for making sure that these are things that actually have a positive impact on the world? So we go through those reviews with every feature. We will hold features if we are not comfortable with where they land. We look for every opportunity we have to try and place mitigating capabilities around it, and then make sure that it's a net positive for the world.
So you talked about your AI ethics principles. Do you want to talk a little bit about your AI ethics review board?
Sure. So like I said, we go through this impact assessment, and that is done in front of a collection of individuals that we have pulled from around the company of making of every different type of job function we can imagine, of different backgrounds and cultures and gender and races, and try and get as diverse a set of perspectives as we can, reviewing those technologies and providing their input on the impact that they can have. We find that, as with pretty much every decision we make at Adobe, having that diverse set of backgrounds actually makes sure that we cover a wide range of possible perspectives that we wouldn't necessarily get from single individuals who may be the one developing the technology or developing the feature.
Adobe recently announced your own creative generative AI model, Firefly. What prompted Adobe to develop this, and could you elaborate a little on how this innovation empowers users and enhances creativity?
Sure. So at Adobe, we've actually been investing in creative AI and creative generative AI for probably the better part of a decade now. There's a number of different features in most of our tools, in Photoshop and Illustrator, in our digital video tools, that are powered by creative AI. About a year ago was when a new breakthrough in generative AI started to make the rounds in the research community and started to show up in the public eye. These are using a new technology called diffusion-based models, which really was this step function in the kinds of uses that we could power with generative AI. And so we looked at these and we started to imagine, how could these be useful for creative customers, and how could it be useful in our products? And we started talking to our customers and we asked them, what do you think of these technologies today? And they were all very excited about it. A lot of questions as well about what impact it will have on the world, but a lot of people were excited about incorporating it into their creative workflows and the benefits they could bring around productivity and around ideation and around exploration. But we heard there was a lot of questions, both about how do they actually bring this stuff into their workflows, because mostly this technology existed outside of the existing tools. So you kind of had to choose which way you were going to go. And there was a lot of questions around some of the underlying questions about whether they actually could even make use of this technology, whether it was for copyright reasons, for legal reasons, for ethics reasons. So we heard basically that everybody, all the customers we were speaking to, were excited about it, but couldn't use what was out there. And so that's what led us to develop our own generative AI with Firefly. And really, the goal of Firefly is differentiated along three key points. Number one is, first and foremost, Firefly is designed to be safe for commercial use. So what that means is that Firefly primarily is trained on on assets where we know the license of it. Most of it is trained on hundreds of millions of images that came from Adobe stock, which is a large repository of very high quality, properly licensed, properly moderated content where we put it through a rigorous review to make sure that it doesn't have other people's IP that's not licensed. It doesn't have humans showing up that we don't have model releases for. So it's content that our customers have come to trust over the past decade or so as safe for use, which makes people feel like it's probably safe for us to train on as well. Number two, it's also trained on some content that has gone out of copyright. So this is content that has aged out. Essentially, it's basically in the public domain. Although that's maybe a legal term that I don't know exactly, but it's older content for which the copyright is expired. And then number three is other content that is openly licensed in one way or another. But primarily, it's trained on Adobe stock. And what that means is, like I said, you can feel safe that the content that is being generated is coming from properly licensed content in the training set, that there aren't brands or trademarks showing up in your output that you're going to get in trouble for using that you shouldn't be using because it's not incorporated into the AI, and that we are not training on content or styles from artists that own a copyright and that don't want their content to be trained on. So that was differentiation number one. Number two is, like I said, it is designed to be incorporated into creative workflows. And you saw that just in the past week when we released Firefly integrated into Photoshop, which brings the use of generative AI to a whole nother level in terms of how you can integrate it into the process of creating assets, whether it's photography, marketing, collateral, whatever it is. And then third and finally is it's designed to be artist friendly. So like I said, it's not trained on random artist content taken from the internet. And we are developing a compensation model for the people who have contributed their content for use and training.
So where can customers use Firefly now and in the future?
So there's two places you can interact with it now. Right now, first of all, it's available at firefly.adobe.com. So that's a website that anybody can go and sign in with an Adobe ID. It's free to use and start to experiment with the technology today and play with some of the features that we developed around it just to get a sense of it, or start to really just have fun generating content. Second is, like I said, it's shown up in Adobe Photoshop, which we just released last week. If you have access to Photoshop, whether it's a free trial or you're a paid customer, you can download the Photoshop beta and play with the generative fill features, which will blow your mind in terms of how it changes the process of exploring and augmenting images and photos. It's also showing up in third-party surfaces. So we announced a few weeks ago that Firefly will be the image generation technology integrated into Adobe, into Google's Bard chat AI, which we're very excited about. So you'll be able to go into Bard and ask it to create an image for you. It'll use Firefly to do that. If you like the image, you can then take it into Adobe Express to do further editing on it, make a birthday card out of it or a marketing campaign out of it or whatever you want. And then eventually it'll be showing up in the not too distant future in pretty much every Adobe product where any content creation happens. So that's our traditional Creative Cloud products like Illustrator or the Substance products, or the Premiere video editing products. You'll see it showing up in Adobe Express. So you can go into the web and create a wide variety of content backed by Firefly and generative AI. And then you'll see it in our digital experience products as well. Not to mention, we'll be making an API available for customers to use going forward.
You mentioned that Firefly was really designed to be creative friendly. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, that is obviously something that we care a lot about as a company, that most of us work here because we like to help build tools for creatives to make amazing, art and content. So there's a couple ways that sort of we've designed Firefly to try and be creator friendly. So first and foremost, again, is by designing it for real creative workflows and having it show up in tools that creative use every day. So that is the best thing we can do, is make it something that is accessible to creatives in their workflows. Beyond that, we've looked at sort of some of the concerns and complaints that the creative community has had around other generative technologies out there and tried to address them in Firefly. So first of all, we do not train Firefly on content just scraped off the open internet. So what that means is, if you are an artist who has put some of your content out there on the web for people to see and put it out there under your name and your brand, we don't train on that. So you cannot go into Adobe Firefly, and if I was a famous artist who people wanted were inspired by my style and wanted to create content in the same style that I have, which would be wonderful, but I am not a great artist. You can't go into Firefly and say, create a picture for me of a cat playing poker in the style of Eli Greenfield. You can do that with some other generative AI out there. If you try and do that with Firefly, it just won't work. It doesn't know anything about my style, so you cannot use it to copy my style or create stuff based on my style. Number two, going forward, one of the things that we've done with the content authenticity initiative is we've actually extended it in a couple ways to address some of the concerns around generative AI. So as I mentioned earlier, first and foremost, if you create anything using Photoshop or Firefly that uses generative AI in the process, we will tag it with a bit of information in the content credentials that says generative AI was used in this. But more importantly for creatives, in terms of helping them feel like they have control over their name, their content, their style, we've also extended it so that you can add in a flag into the content credentials that says, do not train, which means, please, people who are generating artificial intelligence, creative generative AI, do not use my content to train your AI. And that's something that we'll be respecting as we continue to train further on Firefly as content comes in. And we've been working with other partners in the generative AI space and in the content authenticity initiative to get broad adoption of the flag. So ideally, all of the generative AI technologies out there respect the do not train flag. So the last way in which we are being creator friendly is we are trying to develop a compensation policy that will encourage customers and partners to continue to contribute content for use for training future versions of Adobe Firefly. So as I said, the bulk of Adobe Firefly is trained on content that comes from the Adobe stock repository. So millions of images, vector art, video, audio, et cetera, that is available for people to license is also the same content that we use for training. That's incredibly valuable to Firefly and to our customers, especially our enterprise customers who are very interested in that safe for commercial use feature of Firefly. So we want our contributors to continue to contribute their content for training. So we want to make sure that they are compensated for it in a way that benefits them and benefits us and the community as well.
Can you talk about what makes Firefly different from other generative AI technologies? What should enterprises take into consideration about your approach?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different key differentiators that we think from our conversations are really important to our enterprise customers that make Firefly different. First and foremost, like I said, is the fact that it is designed to be safe for commercial use. So they know where the training data comes from. So they know what the usage rights are around Firefly and around the content they create. Second is the fact that Firefly is designed not to accidentally generate other brands or IP that shouldn't be showing up in their content. So if you are a consumer product goods company, you don't want your competitors' content accidentally showing up in the images that you're generating for your marketing use. And you don't want your content showing up in other people's generated images as well. So that's extremely important to enterprise customers. However, you do want your content to be showing up in your own generated images. So one of the things that we're going to be doing and working with our enterprise customers on is allowing them to extend Firefly and customize it with their own content. So while nobody else may be able to create images that has your particular brand of running shoe in the images, you can customize Firefly with your own assets so that the images you create have your own running shoe or whatever your product is in the images you're generating, or has your own particular look or feel or brand guidelines for the images you're creating. And third, I'd say, is the fact that Firefly will be available to customers both in the tools that they're using, the Creative Cloud tools, but also the digital experience tools that we make at Adobe. And it will be available as an API that enterprise customers can integrate into their own workflows. So if you're an enterprise facing the challenges of just the sheer velocity and volume of content they need to create, today, Firefly is going to make it possible for them to dramatically improve their productivity, improve the velocity with which they can create and adapt content, no matter where they're doing that.
So we've talked a lot about Firefly generating images. What else are you using generative AI for, or what else can it be used for that you're looking at?
Yeah, that's a good point. We're super excited about the image capabilities, and that's what's out and available now. And to be honest, the current model that is part of Firefly, that's really the first model that we've developed. So we will be developing additional models that touch other content types, train on different data, address other use cases or customer types. So it's really just the beginning. Eventually, you'll see Firefly for video, Firefly for audio, Firefly for 3D, vector, artwork. So whole range of the creative space. On the other side, when the industry at large talks about generative AI, we also talk a lot about text and these large language models that are out there. And that's something we'll be integrating into our products, especially on the digital experience side, with our Sensei Gen AI features that we're developing for that side as well. So yes, it's super exciting to see people generating images and photos and videos, but you also will be able to use generative AI to develop your campaign brief, to actually look at previous campaigns and help you surface the details and generate a new brief, or develop your audience segments. So generative AI will be able to help you look at your customer data, look at the behavioral data, and understand which customer segments you want to be able to target with your campaigns. It'll help you on the creative side not only generate those images, but actually adapt them for all those different campaigns, or surface them up into the content supply chain again, so you can get it out there targeting all these different customer segments at a high velocity, probably way faster and a much higher volume than you can today. It'll help you develop your customer journeys. So look at all the various touch points where you want to engage with customers and where the right place is to send them content or touch them at various times. Generative AI can help you define what those journeys look like. And then, of course, on the backside, once you have all the data and your customers have been through the flow, we can use these large language models to help you analyze your traffic and analyze the customer behavior and understand and gain insights on what was working and feed that back into the flow for a really good flywheel of generating more and more effective content.
So when we started talking, we talked about just what a hot topic this is. So how do you see this kind of unfolding in the next, let's call it several months versus several years? What do you see this in the future, and what do you think like the really big potential of this market is?
Yeah, so is it months or years? The answer is yes to both. Days, weeks, months, years. I mean, this stuff is unfolding so fast, and as I said at the beginning, I think it's massively transformative for the way we work with and generate content. We know from hearing from all of our customers out there that the demands for content creation, for content generation, are bursting at the seams right now. Right, everybody feels as they get more and more personalized and they get more and more focused, that the amount of content they need to generate is just going up. And integrating generative AI into the tools and the workflows that they're using is going to be a massive benefit for hopefully relieving some of that pressure and allowing them to really target and deliver great experiences in a personalized way for their customers at scale. So I think we're just at the first mile of a marathon length sprint that we're all going on. It's super exciting. There's a lot to figure out, and we're really excited about kind of the journey that we're going on, and excited about working with our customers on figuring out what the next mile is going to look like.
So where will customers be able to use Firefly?
So there's a number of different places where you can use Firefly today, and a whole bunch more where it's going to be showing up. First and foremost, today you can go to firefly.adobe.com, sign in with an Adobe ID. It's free to use, and play with all of the exciting features and demos that we have there about the technology. Second, it's showing up in all of our products, from Creative Cloud to the digital experience products. Today, it's in Photoshop. If you have access to Photoshop, you can download download the beta. Whether you are a trial user or a paid customer, the beta is available to use, and you can experience the new generative fill right there in the beta version of the product. Beyond that, we are integrating it into third-party surfaces as well. So one of the announcements that we made, I think about 2 weeks ago, was integrating it into Google Bard, which is super exciting. So Bard is Google's chat AI-based interface, and when you go into Bard and you ask it to create an image, it will use Adobe Firefly to create that, because they were super excited about all of the ways that we've built the technology and the kind of content that Firefly can generate. So you can go in there, ask for a picture of a cat playing poker. It'll generate it for you. You can get it the style you want, and then you can download it, or you can take it directly into Adobe Express from there if you want to do further editing or incorporate it into a larger project. So we're very excited about that. And then looking beyond, like I said, it'll show up in other Adobe products like Adobe Experience Manager, other Creative Cloud products. It'll be in Adobe Express. So you can go right to the web and start creating content using Firefly and generative AI there. And we'll be making APIs available for enterprise customers to integrate into their own workflows.
Thank you so much, Eli. This was really great. It's been so nice to have you on the 6.5 Summit.
It was a fun conversation, Mel. Thanks for having me.